Hello and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel. And I am very happy to welcome back Bernard Beitman. Hello, Bernard.
Hey, Anna. Great to be back with you.
You are back because of this delightful book. And people can see the title is Life-Changing Synchronicities, A Doctor's Journey of Coincidence and Serendipity. And it is really, really good. So let's begin with why the book?
Well, I'm the first psychiatrist since Carl Jung to try to systematize meaningful coincidences. A lot of people write about them, but organizing them, he started, and I continued to do that. My previous book, Meaningful Coincidences, was intended to do just that, and I think it did. Jung did another book called Memories, Dreams, and Reflections, which was pretty much a biography about himself, an autobiography, told through the stories of his life, which most people, that's how you tell about your life. Well, I wanted to tell my life story through all the coincidences that I've had because they've had a lot to do with the book I wrote previously about meaningful coincidences. What are they? So I had so many of them, I wanted to use them in another way. And this book starts from when I was quite young, 8 or 9, but actually before that. Before that, when I was about 4, I was able to watch my own mind. How did I know that? My mother came into my room and saw me lying on my back looking at the ceiling. She thought I was depressed. I was just watching the activities of my own mind. I didn't know, I mean, looking back, I can say that. And what I had early in my life activated was the capacity to self-observe. And self-observation is fundamental to being able to see meaningful coincidence because you have to match something in your mind with something outside your mind. And these two things require an observation post inside of your mind to see the connection between the mental event and the physical event. Well, I had a first major coincidence when I was 8 or 9, and my dog got lost, and I got lost finding him, and we found each other. And that was the most profoundly important, meaningful coincidence of much of my life because I was one of those lonely boys who needed a puppy, and we were best friends. And I still miss him. My younger son has a similar Cocker Spaniel, and I love him. I'm his granddog. He's my granddog. So that was love, and love brought us together. Love found us. And love has been an underlying theme in a lot of these meaningful coincidences of my life. So I tell the stories, but they're not just about me. Because it turns out that if something weird happened to me, weird being a coincidence, it's also happened to you, the listener, the watcher, the viewer, that my meaningful coincidences aren't that special. I mean, they make us feel unique, which is good. We're each unique. But if we're each unique, then we're unique similarly, so we're not that different. So my coincidences, if you read the book, where you'll see some of them, as people have told me, remind them of their own. So each story has a doctor's note, like what I think about the story itself, and a principle that you, the reader, can take away from it. And there are all kinds of stories, all kinds of places in my life, and that's what you'll get, a sense of the life of a person who has devoted a good part of his life to the study of meaningful coincidences. So you'll see how that evolved. and what those experiences might mean for you, and in you keeping a diary for yourself, because once you start listing them over time, you get to see these funny little patterns go on. Now, Jung and Freud like to tell people to listen to their dreams and write them down. Well, meaningful coincidences are like dreams in daylight. And I don't know, I bet some of them happen during the REM sleep activity of the brain while it's awake. I don't it's hard to prove that one, but it's a kind of a guess. You get into a dreamlike place and you're more likely to see stuff happening. So keep a record of your meaningful coincidences. Tell other people your stories. Learn how to tell your stories. Because one of the things that happens with people when they're telling their coincidence stories, they go on and on about all the details in the story. That's because they love remembering the story. They love remembering it. The trouble is the listener doesn't necessarily love remembering all those details because they don't have much to do with the listener. They have to do with the speaker. So this comment brings us to another important variable for humanity is when we speak, we need to keep in mind the listener and how the listener is responding to what I'm saying right now.
So I want to take you back because you said, that this kind of began with you being able to observe your mind. So are you saying that this requires a degree of detachment?
Of course.
Okay. So why do you feel that detachment is important?
Detached from what becomes part of when you say detached, and I said yes. I didn't ask you, but since we're getting there, what detached from what do you think I'm talking about?
Well, in order to be able to observe ourselves, we have to be able to step back from our emotions to a degree, at least, and to be able to act like a second party that is going, oh, why do you think that is? And, just begin to unravel things. But the other thing is, because I'm trying to get exactly what you're talking about here when you say observing the mind, because there are different ways of interpreting this, as you've just asked me with the word detached. So if we come back to, let's say, meditation, there are some schools of meditation that talk about the observer. So the ability to step outside of the busy mind and just be. So I'm trying to gauge here what you were doing at the age of 8. Were you meditating? Were you lost in a world of fantasy, which is more like visualization? Exactly what were you doing when you say that you were looking at the ceiling and that you were observing your mind?
That's a wonderful question, Anna. It's fundamental to what the book I'm currently writing. What is the self-observer, and what does it do, and what doesn't it do? I can't tell you what I was thinking of when I was lying on the bed, because I wasn't observing myself. And what you just asked is trigger my need to say that we have second self-observers, the observer that can observe the observer, which is what you are now asking us to walk into. Because a lot of people observe and respond to what they observe, analyze it and say, oh, that's a coincidence. But how I observe is what you just talked about. How does my observer work? Well, I'll call it the meta self-observer, or the second one. And so, welcome to the meta observer club, Anna. There aren't there. I don't know how many people are out there doing this, but there aren't as many who are observing themselves. So we are now going to use our meta self-observer to describe what the self-observer does.
Brilliant.
You ready for that?
Oh, yeah.
Let me ask a question about your mind. How come this interests you so much? Because I think that can help my describing this.
Well, I think first and foremost, I want to make sure that the concept is clear to everyone viewing. And I think that this is a tricky concept for most people to grasp. But I think that in order to even begin to get our heads around that concept, I think we need to understand that this requires a degree of self-awareness. So it's the ability to understand our motivation, understand our drives, yes, but I think there's something that's beyond that. And so this is why I'm really wanting to get a more clear and tangible response from you.
Well, since you seem to be a wordsmith, that you like words, you put in the words phrase self-awareness. Well, what is the self? I mean, we could get into that question. And I don't think it's going to be worth it, Anna, to do that one.
No, I can leave that one aside.
and awareness, I think we can, and that gets us to consciousness, and that gets us also. So what you're asking for are preliminary descriptions of a function that each of us has, which is not going to be clearly defined for the people who are listening. That's all. Because as it just did with you, you have your own ideas about what self-observation is. And I'm gotten very intrigued by how my words and your words, whoever the you is, don't have the same meaning. So part of the future of humanity that I am trying to be able to describe requires that we recognize that we may use the same words, but we may not have the same meanings to those words. It's quite likely we don't. And so my view and your view aren't going to be the same of what a self-observer is. They may have some overlap, and that's going to be true of other people. So that's a very meta discussion, but it's essential as part of what you're asking me about. So the idea is that we have the ability to observe the inner workings of our minds. And that includes a lot. I mean, it's not just thoughts. It's not just emotions. And I'm not going to get into, again, the problem of defining emotions versus feelings. One is the mind or brain's name that they give to a body experience. That's usually a feeling as describes an emotion, but it gets turned around too. But we can describe feelings in our body or emotions, and we can describe what we think a name for them might be. But that name won't be enough because a lot of emotions, like grief, are filled with other things, like anger and despair, that and other feelings, loss. People have different names for what's in a particular emotional name. But let's keep that in mind too, that all I can do is cut through and get, I'll call it 80% of what I might mean by a self-observer. No words are right for perfectly. So we have the ability to self-observe. And with all the questions about what consciousness is, well, I know what consciousness is. It's quantum philosophy. It's quantum fields. Um, or it's, look, I have a mathematical formula that says consciousness originated before the body did, so that I know what consciousness is. I make fun of that because we are ignorant beings on this planet right now. There's a lot we don't know. The simple thing like dark energy, dark matter, we don't know what that stuff is. We know it's out there. And there's a lot more we don't know. So the most that we know is that we don't know a lot. So I have to be able to say, I don't know a lot what consciousness is, but I do know pretty well that my ability to observe myself is my bit of whatever consciousness is. It's your part of it. That's your consciousness. That's your experience of consciousness. And there's a beautiful thing that happens when two people's consciousnesses can come together. It sometimes is like we're thinking the same way, we're on the same wavelength. Sometimes it's heart and mind that come together, and I've had the experience of being one body and two minds with people where we can recognize that we're fused physically but separate psychologically. That's a joint self-awareness that we both can confirm of how our bodies are functioning together. That's a shared conscious experience. And that's, for now, this is about as far as I'll go about the self-observer and consciousness. So awareness is a key part of consciousness, of our ability to be aware, but awareness implies an object, awareness of something. So just pure awareness and consciousness begin to merge. So when you talk about awareness, you're beginning to pin down consciousness or awareness into something. Aware of what? Well, in medicine, consciousness is can you move? Can you follow my finger? Can you hear this sound? I mean, are you conscious of the world around you? Well, we won't go to stay with that. Consciousness can expand to what you can observe about yourself and what you can observe about other people, and particularly what you can observe about their responses to you. So emotion, thought, but intuition. Intuition. I mean, I used to think it's like tuition, which means what it costs to go to school. And so you're into paying the tuition for it, which requires some kind of attention to intuition. It's in you, tuition, to learn. You can learn from yourself. And the fun thing about intuition is you don't know where it came from. You get this information and it kind of happens. So there's a wide field of intuitive information available to people, and now we're getting a little more into the future of humanity because we can be aware of being telepathic. The most common thing being I think of someone and they reach out to me. Or you can think that something's gonna happen tomorrow. Like a friend of mine had a dream about being in an amusement park and going to the ocean, but she was on a mountain far from the ocean. Well, then she went to San Francisco and met a guy who showed her the Haight-Ashbury as it is now, where all the hippies used to be. And it was an amusement park, and at the end of the amusement park was Golden Gate, was the Pacific Ocean, end of Golden Gate Park, where she went swimming. So she was able to precognitively notice, she remembered her dreams. So you can be aware of your dreams. You can remember your dreams and predict the future sometimes. You can also pick up human biofield energy. It's important for the future of humanity to know that we got these biofields around us. They're electromagnetic something or others. The heart has the biggest contribution. The brain does some, all the circulation and cells firing create something, and it's something more. It has something to do with us. We are vibrating beings. Uh, any of you who've taken any psychedelics of any kind, you begin to sometimes see that the whole thing vibrates. It's all this stuff going like this. That's what that's what this is made out of. Different frequencies, vibration frequencies that have somewhat different meanings. So we're a vibrating thing too, besides something physical. And that vibration expresses itself sometimes in the biofield. So you can be aware of your biofield, your electromagnetic biofield, and the biofield of somebody else. So that's telling you some of the terrain, the geography of what the self-observer can observe.
Exactly. And that is ultimately what I was wanting to explore with you because I wanted everyone to have a sense of what we mean. So coming back then to the synchronicities, and you were talking about personal synchronicity patterns. So this is where, again, that being the observer comes in because we're able to notice the patterns or even spot the synchronicities. It requires a degree of observation. So tell us about some of the different patterns that you've noticed and identified as regards synchronicities.
Uh, there are lots of patterns, and in the back of the book, I list a bunch of the patterns. But the ones that you can find yourself, that you have your own patterns. We have fingerprints that are unique. We also have ways of walking. If you watch people walk, they each have their own style of walking. I mean, there's a lot of limbs to move around at one time. So and the head and the speed and the body turn. It's fun to really notice the uniqueness of each person's walk, like this, like a thumbprint. We also have unique ways of experiencing meaningful coincidences. We have our own patterns of meaningful coincidences. Now, you have to get meta to see that, and that means you've got to step outside of your stories to be able to see your patterns. So, what are some of my patterns? Is I think what you were asking as a place to start. Well, one of my very favorite ones, it turns out, is finding an opening and going through it. Finding an opening and going through it. The simplest version of that is knocking on people's doors, people I didn't know or people that I didn't want to knock on their door, but intuition told me to do. And there are two instances that I can tell you briefly, and in telling you that, I want to show you how to briefly tell coincidence stories, because I too, like you, can go on, and you, the listener, we viewer, can go on and on and on, but no, we're not going to do that. So the best way to do that is give it a title. The first one will be the Goodbye University of Washington knock. I was leaving the University of Washington to go to the University of Missouri. And there was a guy I've been working with that I wanted to say goodbye to, but I thought we were competitive, but I knocked on his door anyway. And he was there, which doesn't happen all the time. And I go in to say goodbye, Wayne. And on his desk was a paper by two British guys named Bass and Wade. And it was about the relationship between chest pain and psychiatric disorders. Now, Wayne happened to be studying that, had a one-page protocol, and I was going to Missouri and I needed something to study. And so I said, could I have that, your one-page protocol and a copy of the Bass and Wade thing? Oh, sure. I go to the University of Missouri, and the psychiatry clinic front door opens up to the back door of the cardiology clinic. So I had access to cardiology patients. And like Wayne, I followed the protocol and interviewed, with much help, 100, 200 cardiology patients with chest pain that was unexplained, and got 40 papers out of that collaboration, which led to my being chairman of the psychiatry department at the University of Missouri.
I love that, and I think that's the thing is I sometimes think of it as breadcrumbs, you know.
They are.
It's these little things that are breadcrumbs, and some of them don't lead to anywhere in particular, but encourage us to keep going. I think
Yes.
that's which I always find very fascinating. So, okay, so we become aware, firstly, that these synchronicities happen, or meaningful coincidences. We become aware that perhaps there's a pattern here that we are engaged with, that's to do with us, to do with our purpose, however you want to see it. Now I think comes another question, and that is, aside from opening the door when these meaningful coincidences come knocking and saying, yes, I think I'll follow that path, what else do we do? So you wrote in your book, and I love this, imagine something possible and help make it happen. So this is now about visualization and manifestation. So it implies here that there is a way in which we can interact with the pattern once we are aware of it. Tell us more.
The old idea of The Secret, where that got very popular, the book 2009, um, had in it you could lie on the bed in your house and put $1,000 bill on the ceiling, and the money would come to you. Well, that perhaps happens. I won't say it doesn't, but but what I meant by that is by imagining a future, you need to be out there running around to see what's happening out there. You need to be out there. The dog that trots about finds the bone, and especially near a butcher shop. So if you've got an imagination thing that you want to have happen, you got to like have it decently in mind, and go to places where it might happen. And one of those places it might happen is where there is somewhat uncertainty, where things are not clearly outlined about what to do. Because the more outside of regular behavior patterns you get, the more likely coincidences are going to happen. So when you got something in your mind and you're in a chaotic, relatively situation, you're more alert to seeing the pattern out there that matches the ones in your mind. So it's still a personal responsibility thing. It's not the magic of thinking of it and it happens, which a lot of people want to believe. And I believe it happens with some people that way. But there is the responsibility, the agency. And Anna, what I emphasize so much in all of this is the agency of each of us in helping these things happen. A coincidence doesn't exist until you notice it.
And acknowledge it. I think that's
And acknowledge it, yeah.
You have to accept the possibility that there is meaning in what has just happened.
Yeah.
And so this is why you call it meaningful coincidences. I might be more inclined to use synchronicities, because very often people just use the word coincidence in a very dismissive way. Usually it's accompanied by just. It's just a coincidence. And what you're saying is, no, it's not just a coincidence. It's something that goes beyond that. Now, are you going to accept it, or are you going to dismiss it? Because if you dismiss it, then that's a lost opportunity. Whereas if you're going to even just play with the idea of it having something meaningful in there for you, then that is an invitation to growth and to perhaps adventure and to discover more.
Yeah, I like the adventure, and because this, I, I I like adventure, and in all kinds of different ways, and it's an invitation to adventure. I was gonna say, you said it better than I do, really. I call it the signpost. They're signposts, not commands. They're suggestions. You have to define it, but you said it very well. That we can decide what it means to us. And meaning has a lot of different meanings to it, so we can play with that if you want. We decide what it means by not just thinking of it in the moment, but by following it, seeing what happens. It's
There is really, this is a very magical way of seeing the world, as in it requires us to engage our imagination, but it requires us also to explore things in a way that is very non-linear. And I think, when I'm working with my clients, and I'm an analytical hypnotherapist, and we've done regression work, and they're piecing together things that they're beginning to understand about themselves and what they need to move forward, and how to reframe the past so that they can take a different view of past events, etc., to make peace with themselves, to make peace with the past. We also begin a process. I say we because I help them. It's part of the work, is to start visualizing something new, something different. And the reason I will use the word magical is because the minute we seem to get to that point where we're imagining, or I'm helping them to free their imagination to bring in something new, almost immediately things begin to change in the world around them. And it does feel magical because these meaningful coincidences start cropping up. The beauty of it is that they're now in a position to engage with them, whereas before they would not have. And suddenly, a whole host of possibilities begins to unravel, and there are choices where they thought they had none. And it is a stunningly beautiful thing to witness. So, and I'm sure that you, as a psychiatrist, have seen that happen with your patients.
No, not with the drama that you have just said.
Now that's
Um,
the thing.
no, imagine the future. The book I'm writing now is imagining the future of humanity. That is part of the therapy. And I am so delighted to hear you bringing that up, because too many therapists are caught with resolving the past and not going into what you just did. Um,
I feel it's a crucial part of the healing process, because it's so liberating. If we only deal with the past, it's like it's unfinished. There's unfinished business, because then it's what now? Because I
Right.
here
Right.
came here because I wanted to change. I understand that the past was holding me back. I'm okay with that now. I'm at peace with that now. But what next? And I think it's the what next because is that so important, because if we truly want to heal the past, we have to have an alternative vision to it. And I think it's part of the work that we're doing with clients. It must be to envisage something else, because otherwise, it's that whole thing about neural pathways and building new neural pathways, but you don't really eliminate the old neural pathways. What you're doing is you're finding different routes or different avenues within the brain. But if you don't do that, the temptation to go to how things were, I think, is greater. I think this is a powerful reinforcer for the motivation to change. And I think it's a very vital thing. The future is unwritten, but it is a vital part of healing the past and creating hope, I think, because then that you could feel quite empty. You think so. You need something. You need that hope. You need that vision to move forward.
I noticed that my comment about the future enlivened you.
I just think that you're right. It's huge. It's really important. It's unfinished. Healing is unfinished unless we can start actually imagining.
And what I imagine from your response is that many of the therapists don't emphasize the future the way you do.
Quite possibly.
Well, that's what your behavior suggested, because you were also lecturing in a very good way, but also saying, hey, baby, that's not enough. And this is why. And that's what I'm saying too. I mean, so it's just a nice coincidence for me that you are getting on what was used to be called your high horse and driving off into the future on your horse that I'm doing right now. I'm imagining the future of humanity. I'm writing the new myth and what it looks like to be living in this new myth of the future. So this is what I'm doing now. What you just began to talk about is helping the patient, which is humanity, imagine a future that's not based on the past, which is mostly cataclysmic, also driven subconsciously in great part by Christianity's last book of Revelation, which is just a horrific idea of the future for humanity, and it's embedded in the subconscious and the unconscious of many parts of the world. We need a new myth. That one is not a good one to go by. So,
It's it's interesting, isn't it? Because we begin by talking about coincidence and serendipity. But in doing so, the whole conversation evolves into so much more. And I think it's very apt, because what we're saying is that there's more to these coincidences than meets the eye. And you used the word agency at one point.
yeah, I'll use it again if you want.
Yeah, it's huge because
Yeah.
it if we want to understand that we live in, well, I'm going to rephrase this. if we want to understand what so many people are talking about, you know, that buzzword, co-creation, this is it. It's understanding that, as you said, there are signposts. I used breadcrumbs. And we need to be open to finding them and then consider, at the very least, working with them. Because when we do that, then we have an increased agency and we begin to use our imaginations. And I really like something that you said right at the start, where you were talking about the patterns. And you were saying we can interpret the patterns like we would dreams,
Mm-hmm.
which is so apt because, well, many people would say this is a waking dream. So it's all part of getting that better understanding of ourselves so that we have a better vision of who we are and the direction we want to go in.
Yeah, and that's we got off. This really, for me, took off when you did your imagination. We did your future thing. That's uh, you're just singing my song on that one. So I actually am most interested. I'll mention this. Synchronicity is part of helping humanity evolve. There are global synchronicities that can help humanity evolve, but I can leave that for another part of the discussion if you want. But I'm most interested in how it is that you, let's say, induce your clients to begin imagining a new future, which then leads to the magic of more synchronicities coming in.
I'm just trying to think of an example. It's a very subtle process, and so it's kind of difficult to articulate it, and it's very individual as well for everyone, obviously. Um, but I would say inherent in the method of the work of this working with hypnosis in this particular way, it's like a story. There's a beginning, a middle, and an end. So the beginning is, where does it hurt, you know, and then tracking that feeling to where the story began. Then there is a reimagining the story, as in what this is the child's interpretation of what happened. Is there a different interpretation that we can put on this? And sometimes it's not, you know, there are times when what happened was truly horrific because it involves abuse. So we're not going to say that abuse isn't abuse. So we're not going to reimagine it that way. But now we're wanting to find a different perspective on this that doesn't deny the pain, but actually allows a freedom from it. So how do we do that? And that dynamic is something that the client needs to begin to play with. And it's in that moment where we're going, okay, well, that was truly horrific. What can you take from that that's strengthening you now? How can you make peace with what happened? And so there's a lot of different questions that we can explore there. But once that bit of the work is done, and I'm making it sound incredibly simple, it's obviously a very involved process. Once that bit is done, then comes the visualization. And the visualization comes from what the client has already told me makes them feel good and makes them feel happy. And as we begin, a story begins to develop. And the client then is very engaged with that story. And we use that and we reinforce that. We, as in hypnotherapists, should reinforce that story. And so we come to the end of the session with a vision of some kind. So and then what happens is that the client begins to notice little things. And it's quite remarkable because between two sessions, sometimes, when I'm checking in with them right at the beginning of the next session, I'll say to them, so that feeling that we were working with last time, where are we with it now? Where are you with it now? Sometimes they can't remember having had that feeling that had been troubling them for, I don't know, decades in some cases. They've forgotten it. And I think, oh, that's good. Okay, so what's up next? And so on we go. But because we end each session with that visualization for the future, they start to notice little things that they probably would not have noticed before. And that then begins to build the change that they were wanting in the first place. And I think that that's, to me, a very special and magical process.
Now, the key question for me is what they imagine at the end of the session as part of the vision for the future. They begin to see elements of that vision in their daily life.
Yes.
Now, that's where we started this discussion for me, is that the magic of manifestation is just what we just said, is that you got to notice it and acknowledge it. It's right there, right in front of you. I mean, how many stories we have of traveling all over the world and you come back home and that's where the treasure is, right under your doorstep, that it's right in front of you. And you got to get away to be able to see it. And you help them get away. And now, again, the key thing, without talking too much more about it, is that you help them plant in their minds what they want.
Yeah.
And then they can scan their environment for clues for what they want.
That's it. That's it, exactly. So this is why I wanted to have this beautiful conversation with you, because it is, I feel, truly a part of liberating ourselves from everything that is untoward within us, to create a more hopeful and joyful existence for ourselves. So the book that we have been discussing is called Life-Changing Synchronicities, A Doctor's Journey of Coincidence and Serendipity. There is the cover again, and I'll be putting a link to it in the description box. Bernard, thank you for a most wonderful conversation.
You're very welcome, Anna, and I thank you for your imagination, among other things.
Thank you. Thank you all for watching. Now, in the description box, in addition to links to the book, we will have Bernard's website. So what is it, Bernard?
Coincider.com, coincider.com.
Wonderful.
But if you just put my name, Bernard Beitman, in there, you'll see my website, my Psychology Today blog, my own podcast, and you'll also find the Coincidence Project website.
Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you very much. And in addition to that, you will also find links to my own websites and to my Substack. Until next time, we're going to be talking about angels and actual angel encounters. Until then, goodbye.